I kind of discovered the full extent of my queer identity fairly recently, because like I grew up through the 90s. It was either you were gay or straight, and it's only till recently I'm like, oh, I'm gender fluid, I'm bisexual, these are things that exist. Nobody fucking told me this when I was growing up. So it's cool because one that's what's so cool that the show like this exists, and also going back to that moment where Nick is kind of discovering his sexuality. I love that it feels so like real and today that he's searching on like YouTube and finding videos of people describing what bisexuality is and what signs that you could be bi and stuff like this.
He finds a bisexual vlogger, and it's for real. That was not filmed for Heartstopper.
For that reason, I love that a show like this exists for teenagers right now who are going through this stuff. Like, it kind of makes me wish I had a show like that when I was growing up, because I might have discovered certain things a little sooner. Hello and welcome to Renegades of the Podcast, a monthly podcast for all the aliens, hosted by us, Unheard, Sirens Incorporated. I am Remy.
I'm Juliet.
And we're joined by a very special guest, our good friend Natalia is with us on the couch this month. That's right, we are musicians. We create pop music from an alternate universe. It's kind of our combo of synth pop and synthwave, and it's for, nerds and people who feel out of place like us, nerds and queerdos. And, if you're coming across our podcast and you somehow never heard our music before, we encourage you to check it out. It's right here on YouTube or Spotify, whether you're watching us or listening to us.
And wherever there's music, you can get all the other places too.
I got a fetish for freedom tonight. I got a fetish for freedom tonight. My lust for life. Stretch all the walls, I cannot be confined.
Exactly.
And Unheard Sirens Inc. Inc.com.
No, unheardsirens.com.
Unheardsirens.com, no ink. Okay, unheardsirens.com. But everywhere else, you're going to need to search Unheard Sirens Inc. Inc.
Yeah. So this is a pretty cool topic, and it's one that you suggested, Juliet. So even though I usually introduce these things and do the kind of hosting duties, I'm going to turn it over to you, because I think you're probably better equipped to introduce this one.
Okay,
it's a pretty cool topic we're covering tonight.
With this podcast, we like to reflect on culture, especially through all different forms of art. And that includes film and other music and fashion and society and how all of those things are portrayed. And so we talk a lot about kind of queer culture in lots of different ways, and on other episodes of this podcast, because it's been an important part of, I think, all of our identities, that none of us identify as hetero or straight,
cisgender,
people. It's like we all sort of identify as queer in some way or another, and have for a really, really long time. But there was a journey. I did not always know what I was. I knew some things about how I felt, and I didn't understand them, and I didn't have words for them. So it really was not until I left home and was around, other young adults and learning a lot more stuff that I was like, oh, that's called bi. My life makes sense now.
It's called I'm bi, actually.
Yes. I'm
bi, actually.
And now I've realized it's much more pan, because it's not even just bi, only male, female, binary. For me, it's about love and about
the definition of bi has even changed over it kind of has been expanded to incorporate more than just two genders with different gender identities as well.
And pan, I think sometimes it's just used that way.
Yeah, and pan is kind of like bi plus, because it's like you are attracted to a person regardless of the gender and the genitals and whatever's going on.
Usually with pan, it's like you are connected to the person and you don't care. You like the wine, you don't care about the bottle.
Exactly.
You're going to go Schitt's Creek reference.
Yes, we are always going to go with a Schitt's Creek reference.
And bi, I think for me personally, is one where I feel attached to it.
Yeah.
I don't want to change it.
Yeah.
Because that was what I think I figured that one out. It might have been late high school, early college.
Yeah, it was early college for me.
And it was just like...
I didn't even know it existed.
Yeah,
I didn't know it happened.
Yeah, same.
I only
Growing up
knew
through the
that
90s,
there
it was only gay or straight.
female
That's it.
volleyball
Yeah.
coaches and gay men of all kinds. That's all I knew growing up.
Yeah.
Literally, my parents, when I came home first year, my parents were not super close-minded either, but they didn't know how to talk about this stuff. They just didn't have language. They weren't actually homophobic or discriminatory, but they didn't have the language or the skills. And so I remember I came home we went to Guilford College, which is a Quaker college, and Quakers believe in social justice and equality for all races, all genders, and they always have. They're nonviolent.
And anti-hierarchy.
Anti-hierarchical, anti-warfare. Lovely. So everybody was like an activist and sort of a hippie or a bohemian or goth or whatever at our school, but it didn't have a lot of main culture. It only had all the countercultures, and we loved it. And I came home for a break from Guilford, and I remember sitting on our little love seat in my family den. My parents looked a little shifty and weird, and I was sort of like, what? Because they usually were waiting to tell me something, or they'd have something special when I got home, and they were like, lean forward. So, are you thinking about maybe minoring in PE or anything? Like phys ed?
Oh
or
my
maybe
God.
you have a special
Wow.
friend from phys ed?
That's so special.
And that was
so
like
sweet.
That was their way to be like, is there something you want to tell us?
Oh
Are you a
my God.
lesbian? Are you a lesbian, honey? No, I'm
Yeah.
I'm bi. So yeah. But I just at the time just sort of got big eyes and was like, no. Let's not talk about this right now. And years later, I did talk with him about it. But anyway, so we wanted to talk about how queer culture is evolving and being portrayed in more and more respectful, diverse, interesting, creative ways, where the creativity suits the characters and the individuals. These individuals just exist in society because, indeed, these individuals just exist in all societies.
Exactly.
And luckily, we live in a society where it is relatively safe and relatively possible. Not possible for every single person where
in
we
every
live,
single part.
in every single
Yeah.
part of
Country
our
that we
country,
live.
the
Right.
United States of America, but more possible than many other places in the world. But
Right.
FYI, other places in the world, all identities and sexualities exist amongst humans and many other
Yeah.
creatures on the planet. We are not the only
Right.
creatures with more than one or the other gender, and that might change gender during their life. Many animals and plants all change genders and have different roles, and also different kinds of lovers and different kinds of physical interactions.
Yes.
So everybody's just get the hell over
Lots
it.
of animals have sexual interactions with members of their same gender.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it, obviously, it's not for reproduction.
Obviously,
Yeah.
because it doesn't lead to
and
reproduction.
there's
So
some-
it's just part of being alive. Everybody needs to
Right.
get the fuck over it. So we wanted to talk about Heartstopper, which is a show that Natalia first told me to watch, and then I've shown it to everybody I care about because I feel that everybody I care about, and pretty much everybody everywhere, should watch this show. And so I think we'll foray from there into some other related shows and culture that are influencing all of us. Because like I said, we've talked about these issues before, but never explicitly.
Yeah.
And we geek out and Heartstopper so much that I thought it would be a really nice focal point for like just a much bigger conversation. Because for me, it helps me feel like more positive about the reality we live in, that the graphic novel series exists, that it was adapted with participation by the graphic novelist into the show.
she has control.
And she has
She's the
creative control.
showrunner.
Showrunner. And that the show exists. Because there are just so many different kinds of sexualities that the kids are exploring, and I didn't have that. I only knew that there were female sports coaches and gay men.
And there is a female sports coach.
And there is a female sports
Who is a
coach
lesbian.
who you eventually discover is gay, but actually you don't discover that for a long time.
Because it's not important.
At first you think maybe she's just an ally. It's not revealed until
it's
quite a
not
long way
really
in.
revealed until when she
says, yeah, it was like that when I found my wife or whatever.
Yes.
She finally says something, but you don't know, and it doesn't matter because all the characters are coming to terms with things, and most of them are supportive. You do encounter some homophobic characters in the series that represent a lot of things that people in the queer community experience every day.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
I think I want to turn it over to Natalia, maybe to introduce Heartstopper to folks that might not have seen it. Like, tell us what it is. What is Heartstopper? What is this thing you're talking about, and where can I find it?
Well, the wonderful thing about Heartstopper is that it's on Netflix, so it is available to a lot of people. Mm-hmm. It is a British show. The creator is English. The series, there are, I think, to date, 5 Heartstopper graphic novels, and I think there's one that's like a little novella that's between 2 of them. I've read 4 because the last 2 just came out this past year. Another really cool thing about it is there's 2 seasons. There will be at least a 3rd coming out in October on Netflix. The other thing I really loved about it, because I get overwhelmed sometimes when there's huge amount of shows because of my bandwidth not being that great. And there's 8 episodes, they're half an hour long. You can watch an entire season in half a day, which I have done. And I came across it, yes. I'd heard about it, and I'm always attracted to anything that has positive queer representation. And I was in a really dark place in my life, and I watched that first season over and over and over again because it made me feel hopeful.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And the acting is superb.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And the writing is superb. And it made me, and the music selection.
The music section is
amazing.
So good, which we love to like pay our respects to the kinds of film and show and cinema that we review when there's just like beautiful integration of music. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So thoughtful, mm-hmm. tone, the lyrics, how it gets edited in, just this is like the best. Like they're totally, the music is one of the characters. It's just as important as the set design, which I think I love the set design. I love the color schemes that they use. They have symbolic sort of colors with certain characters, and there are just so many scenes that have certain colors that carry through. And it's because it was a graphic novel, the use of color is very important, and sometimes the graphic novelists can't afford to have tons of color everywhere, so they might have a lot of panels that are in black and white they're just shaded but they're not colored, and just like one color, because then that book costs a little bit more, or at least before, I don't know how it is today, but it has been more expensive every color that you've added getting things printed up. So it becomes really important and tasteful and purposeful. Like, are you going to use color? How are you going to use color? And I can see in the show a certain sensibility about the intentionality and the choices of color that come from her being an artist who had to think about all this on the page first.
Mm-hmm. Also, so it's primarily surrounds Nick and Charlie. Nick is a 5th form rugby player, and
equivalent of 11th grade for us, I think.
Yes, he is, because Charlie...
He has 2 more years of high school. You begin at the beginning of a school year with kids in a boarding school, adjacent boarding schools, all boys.
They're not boarding because they go home.
Girls. They go home, but they're private schools or whatever.
Yes.
So they're separated into male and female, and you do have one character that just before the show has started has transitioned and is now at the girls' school and starting there, and was previously at the boys' school while transitioning. So you're playing with this from the very get-go of like a boys' school and a girls' school. So now what if you transition? Anyway, so tell us about Nick and Charlie.
And then Charlie is a year behind. I think he turns 15 the first season.
Yeah.
And then, so Nick is either 16 or about to turn 16. It's only a year older than Charlie.
Yeah.
And Charlie was outed without his consent the year previously and was severely...
By accident by a friend who got overheard.
Yes. It was...
He wasn't malicious, but then it was taken malicious and turned into bullying.
Mm-hmm.
He was incredibly bullied to an extent that it has affected him quite a bit.
Yeah.
But also was one... Charlie, he says in the show, always knew that he was gay. He
wasn't questioning. He was clear.
He was very clear, had always been really clear. One of the nice things about the graphic novel, if you look at it and you watch the show, is that both Nick and Charlie's rooms are exactly they remade them exactly from a graphic novel. And they're so wonderful as set pieces.
They are so wonderful.
But it's also, like, I was reading the graphic novel after I'd seen it, and I was like, wait.
Everything is exactly...
Everything
how
is
about
the
Tao's
same.
room?
I think so, too, but that was where I had that, like,
I love Tao's room,
realization of, like, oh my God.
Yeah, so Charlie has a small, intimate friend group of misfits. And then Nick is the star rugby player, the school's #1 top star rugby player, rugby captain, scores all the points, and everybody likes him. And as his friend says, of course he's straight. He looks like a golden retriever.
And he's like, no, he doesn't.
No, he does.
Maybe he does.
He does. He is like a beautiful, gorgeous human male who was just like a mage has come along and been like, golden retriever, be a beautiful, beautiful young man. And he does have that quality. I feel like it's so funny and so accurate.
It is. He is a golden retriever. It's a good thing. It's
and he is
beautiful.
loyal and loving and intelligent, and he has a lot of good qualities of golden
And
retrievers.
so sweet.
Yeah. So they get seated next to each other in our equivalent of homeroom. So outside of the academic classes, students start the day every day in the U.S. They have a different name for it in England and other educational systems. But it's not your classes. So it's not having English together and math together. Instead, homeroom is just a place where people show up and they make sure you're attending school, and you get generic announcements of the school and stuff. So they get seated together side by side, even though they're a year apart, because the students are just aggregated out into these homerooms. And they strike up a friendship that quickly turns into a crush for Charlie. And his friends are like, stop
He's
doing
straight.
this.
He's straight.
You have a crush on a straight boy, so you're going to get your heart broken.
Not just that, they're like, he is the most obvious straight boy you will ever run into your entire life.
He's an athlete. Just look at him. His friends are all
He's 100% straight. Yeah.
Yeah. So of course, everybody's going to take it
yeah.
for granted. He's not presenting in any way that suggests that he's not heterosexual.
But then.
Well, but there's also this amazing, glorious moment when Charlie is sitting between Tao and Isaac, and they're telling him that he's obviously straight, and Isaac's always has his head in a book, always. And he says, masked men can be gay. He looks at Tao. Bisexuals exist. And then he goes, I know because he told me. Because he was queering him in texting.
Yeah.
He's like, it's so great that you're my
my straight white ally or something.
That you're my supportive straight ally or something like that. Yeah. And he's like, yeah, haha. And so he's like, oh, you are straight. But the only reason you should assume that someone is whatever sexuality is that they tell you.
Yeah.
And I love that moment so much.
And I think, Nick starts to feel very drawn to Charlie, and he loves their relationship and friendship that grows between them. The first time his mom sees Charlie come over to the house, she says, he's not a lot like your other friends. And you think maybe she's going to say something negative because it's a gay character and we're all very sensitized to like, okay, if you're not normal, the next thing's going to be a slam. Instead, the mom does a right turn, and she's, he's not a lot like your normal friends. You're much more your real self with him. You're much more relaxed. And I think that's true when we start to really find our people without any effort or forcing it. Nick starts to evolve, and more of him than he ever even knew was in there emerges, including the fact that he begins to question privately for himself without talking to anyone else. He's just online. You see him Googling things, trying to figure out if he is more than just a straight guy, which he slowly realizes he is.
Yeah.
So what's your feeling on it? Because
you were saying you're kind of like your story of I kind of discovered the full extent of my queer identity fairly recently, in recent years comparatively. So because I grew up through the 90s. It was either you were gay or straight, and I was, I definitely knew I was attracted to girls at my school, and I was very, attracted, but I was not, fully, I guess masculine enough for some people. So I kept getting, people would try and jam me in the box. Oh, you're gay, right? You're gay, right? Like, no, I'm not. But I never felt all the way comfortable with the whole cis and straight male thing either. And so and it's only till recently I'm like, oh, I'm gender fluid, I'm bisexual, these are things that exist. nobody fucking told me this when I was growing up. So it's cool that, because one, that's what's so cool that the show like this exists, and also going back to that moment where Nick is kind of discovering his sexuality. I love that it feels so like real and today, that he's searching on like YouTube and finding videos of people describing what bisexuality is and what signs that you could be bi and stuff like this.
Show that
he finds a bisexual vlogger.
Yeah.
And that it's for real. That was not filmed for Heartstopper.
Gotcha.
That's a real YouTube.
So they like found a real thing and like probably got his permission to use the video.
Yes.
Like, that's cool.
Yes.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
he's like taking one of those online quizzes. You know, what percentile gay are you? You know, like, because he doesn't know either. He hasn't really been exposed.
So for that reason, I love that a show like this exists for teenagers right now who are going through this stuff. Like, it kind of makes me wish I had a show like that when I was growing up, because I might have discovered certain things a little sooner. At the same time, it's like it's like an intro to a lot of these queer identities. It's like that 101. So to that extent, I'd say it's not necessarily made for me where I'm at right now, but I recognize what it is for, you know, the generations younger than us and what it brings to the table for them. So it's like, yeah, that's super cool.
Another thing that gave me a lot of hope from the show was this is also a show kids could watch if their parents aren't complete homophobic bigots. This is a show kids and parents could watch together, because the most they do is kiss, and it's not even that much.
Yeah.
And like it's very, and like some of the, and it's wonderful. Yes, they run into some homophobia and some bad parents and bad parenting, but there are some wonderful supportive parents and teachers that made me so happy, because even if kids don't have that, they can think, oh, maybe there are adults that will help me and support me, as opposed to always being against me just because I might have these awful people in my life. That's maybe not the norm, or it shouldn't be.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think into the second season, you start to see the first season becomes the love story. And the other characters are important too, and everybody's being developed in at least small ways. All the different characters you're meeting. So there's more than just the two lead male actors. There's the trans Elle. I'm like, oh my god, why am I?
Elle is being
like
played.
an Elle. So Elle is
Is it Yasmin Finney?
Yeah. And that is a trans actress.
Yeah. She was in Doctor Who very recently.
Yeah.
Yep.
And she is so lovely and so beautiful. And so you're also with Elle learning the girls' school through this original group of friends, but now Elle has left these four, because it's these four friends: Isaac, who reads; Tao, who loves cinema and has like movies all over his room; Charlie, who likes to play the drums and is good in school but not overly like attached to school. He's more creative
and very shy,
and Elle, who has transitioned and been able to transfer now to the girls' school next door, but she's alone and she feels very conspicuous. She's very tall, and so she's sort of like hunched in and like not talking to anyone. And finally, one of the teachers challenges her. It's been like most of the first term, I think, and she hasn't really made any friends. And the teacher challenges her to start trying. And it sort of opens the door, even though someone approaches her first not long after it, but she accepts the offer and becomes friends with two girls. And then slowly she starts to realize they're not just best friends who adore each other. They're actually a couple, but they haven't come out yet. And so then also during the course of the first season, her two new friends at the school come out as the school lesbians, because they are the first and only out female couple at this girls' school as well. So you have these two different sets of relationships happening that you're watching, along with Elle's journey to figure out who she is and what she might want, and what to do when you've transitioned and all of a sudden you're accepted in society in new ways and different ways. And she has a setting that she's at the girls' school, which is given, I think, she doesn't have to fight anymore. You have the sense that Elle has had some very painful years, but they're before the story starts. And Elle is a little more confident and more sure of herself. She's made the transition. She's fought for what she needed to fight for to be able to transfer to the girls' school. But now she's a little bit alone, but she has as inner strength. Charlie, on the other hand, was bullied when he was accidentally outed by their friend group, talking about Charlie coming out to them privately. They spoke about it where they were overheard. So it was not malicious, but did lead to other people horribly bullying Charlie, because you have the sense that he's the only or one of the only out students in the entire boys' school as well. And he has a secret relationship as the show begins that falls apart very quickly, that's quite dysfunctional. And all of this is reinforced to Charlie that he is wrong, and he knows what he is, and he can't change it, and he's not trying to change it, but he's trying to hide.
And he feels like he ruins everything.
He blames himself for everything that goes wrong, because he thinks it's because he screwed up, so he screws up everything for the people he cares about. So he's very fearful about another relationship, because his first boyfriend was
Using him.
And
had a lot of internalized homophobia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he had a very dysfunctional first relationship, and was forced to keep it private. He couldn't even tell his friends that it was happening. He only told his art teacher, who's like the one teacher who helped protect him and allow him to eat lunch the previous year when he was bullied in the art classroom, to get away from bullies at lunch, which I relate to because I was bullied horribly. Horribly. Everybody I went to middle school was mean to me. What the fuck, guys? That sucked so hard. I wanted to die for years. So by the time I got to high school, I was terrified of everybody, and I just didn't want to be noticed. And I felt like a walking target all the time. I'm also tall, like Elle, and confident. And my mom taught at my high school, and so I did the dorkiest, nerdiest, most loser thing to do in the world, and ate almost all the time in my mom's classroom in her English class, because in middle school, I would eat in the bathroom on the toilet, usually crying, and I would eat like 4 soda crackers because they would make fun of my body type and that I was tall, and so I was trying to disappear by starving myself, and instead I could like eat a small lunch. I've gotten away from 4 soda crackers to slowly, starve myself. I was eating food again. But I had to like eat in my mom's classroom because my mom was a very supportive, safe space, and other people could eat in her classroom too. So Mr. Ajayi is Charlie's art teacher, of no relation whatsoever. So unlike me, that I had a genetic relationship, he does not. But this teacher relates to him and gives him this safe space. So
is gay.
Is
out at school.
So he has a gay teacher that relates to him, and so that is the only person that Charlie tells about the secret boyfriend at first. And so that you have like a teacher that kind of knows more than anyone else in the show actually about Charlie in some ways, but he doesn't see him all the time, so he doesn't know him that well.
And the other thing I remember watching and I thought was really useful and helpful and interesting was that the parents, the teachers, at least particularly in the first season, less so in the second, the ones you see are very much not trying to force Charlie to do anything, not telling him what he should do. Mm-hmm. They are sometimes offering some advice or support, but mostly they want to leave those decisions up to Charlie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Including his sister. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
My favorite.
Yes. And his dad, his dad drives him a couple times, and he's like, will you be safe? Are you okay?
You can call me.
Yeah. You can call me and your mother anytime if, you
want to leave.
Anytime you want to leave, we'll come back. Or we'll meet you at blank time. But we can come earlier. And they're just sort of there, but not in the way. It's really, really lovely. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what I really like and appreciate about this show is all of the plot stuff and the drama and any of the, dynamics that happen between the characters. They all feel very real, and it doesn't feel like they're just doing the most dramatic thing they possibly could do. Like, I feel like a lesser writer or lesser, would have just made, Nick and Charlie like blow up and have fights and all the time and all this kind of bullcrap.
Oh,
And, like, they don't need to do that. It just shows how organically they're liking and loving and, cute puppy love is growing. It just shows it in such a way that it feels like you're watching real people and not, something that some writer and some writers
relate so
room
deeply
came
to
up with.
so many like little moments of the show.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it's quite universal. I'm not a gay man, and I'm not been a man in this lifetime, or that I can actively recall in this moment. So it's not my story per se, and yet there's all these moments between them, and then because of it focuses the most on them in the first season. In the second season, now there's more relationships starting to happen between the other characters too. But even just watching Nick and Charlie fall in love is like the sweetest thing in the universe. There's this scene where they're sitting.
Should be called Heartwarmer.
Yeah, your heart. It's like, oh. Yeah, so they're sitting there, and Charlie has fallen asleep, and Nick is starting to realize he has feelings for Charlie, and he's at Charlie's house. They're watching TV. Charlie's all bundled up in a fuzzy blanket and just conked out. And so Nick is slowly letting their hands get closer together, and you see these little like yellow
Sparks.
lightning bolts, and the whole like they're hand drawn on the otherwise live action frame, and there's also slight golden coloring drawn around, so it's like the electricity that you start to feel when there's attraction. And then it's like getting closer, and he's like barely touching the pinky. It's like
they don't touch in that moment. He
is so close.
Pulls his hand
He's
away.
afraid to touch, but it comes back in other moments. And then there'll be like little hearts or little feathers or little flowers that like leaves. And for different characters in the different seasons, they all start to get, when they're starting to get that swirly like attraction thing that's not just friendship attraction, because we can like love our friends too, and they do. There's a lot of friends that really love each other. But when some of them start to realize that it's more than just friendship, you can get like one little leaf floating around, or I think for Elle it's flowers, when she starts to realize that she has feelings for Tao. So it's so beautiful. I love the tasteful way that there's like a little bit of animation, but like that little I'm like, oh, that was me. I felt that like right after Remy and I fell in love, we were like that at this concert. We were sitting down, and I remember I wrote all the lyrics to a song that we still haven't adapted to music, and I don't know where the lyrics are now, but it's called The Language of Fingertips. And it was about like, we were just being very tasteful in public, so we weren't doing a bunch of PDA, but it was just like the way we could hold hands and the way that our fingers can touch, and it was just, I felt very moved by that. So I have like a piece I wrote about how important that like little bit of contact is when you're newly finding somebody or newly with somebody, and it's just so beautifully captured in the show in a way that I've never seen it so well captured in anything else ever. Like it is my like, you know,
there's also
one of my top favorite falling in love things.
The end of that scene when Nick is leaving and he asks Charlie if he can hug him. He's like, "You look so cuddly." Yeah. And then they have this like, it's a long hug. Yeah. It's a very like warm.
He hugs him, but then he's also kind of just like keeps holding him, can't let go.
And he sort of nestles his head into, and like Tori, who's his older sister, who just
Charlie's sister,
appears out of nowhere all the time,
slurping on a straw.
Just slurping on a straw, and she goes, "I don't think he's straight." After having witnessed this hug,
this long hug,
it's a beautiful moment though, because it's also like you'll see it in Nick's face, like how conflicted he is, and how his feelings are getting the better of him, and how good hugging Charlie makes him feel. And one of the things that keeps them apart, stressors that keeps them apart, is because Charlie's so afraid of ruining Nick's life. He is so afraid that if Nick
Nick's
comes out,
friends group will reject him,
and that he will lose everything, and that he will be bullied the way that he doesn't want
Nick to
go through what he had to go through, and he's terrified of that.
And Nick starts immediately like taking on any of the bullies that come at Charlie, because even when they're just friends and he doesn't realize there's more than just friendship feelings, Nick doesn't stand for bullying anyway. He's just a kind, decent, sweet person, but also like he's strong, and so he's confident, and so he doesn't want Charlie to be bullied either. So they both care so much about each other and what's going to happen for the two of them. And I think into the second season, you start to see a lot more nuance of how the bullying has continued to eat away at Charlie and what's happening with that. And I don't want to give it all away, maybe, and let people enjoy the second season. But you start to see that Nick has some, has a very unsupportive sibling who's away at college. And each of the characters, you start to see some of the things that they've hidden from each other or from themselves, or that were hidden from us as the audience. So it's continuing to deepen and evolve and develop. And they go on a big trip to France, and they had beautiful French music during their journey in France. It was so sweet. I was like downloading all that French music. I'm learning all these French artists I didn't know before, because like I just love the music selection of the show.
Yeah. So Natalia, you know a little bit more about, I guess, the source material than I think Juliet and I knew. I'm guessing the creator is queer. I mean,
she's asexual.
Asexual. Okay.
Which
there
is
you go.
Isaac. Isaac starts to realize during season 2 that he may be aromantic, or he may be asexual. Like Isaac doesn't quite know yet. He buys a book on it, and he's always in books, and he finds like this whole like end cap of queer literature, and then there's like one book about exploring asexuality and aromanticism, and he's just like, oh.
And he meets,
because he doesn't know what he is.
They go to an art exhibit that Elle is part of. That is at Here and Queer, I think, is what the art exhibit is called.
Yeah.
And he sees a piece by somebody who is who tells him those terms.
Yeah,
and that
'cause he
because
didn't
he
really
was
know they
confused
existed.
about what does it mean to like someone.
Yeah.
If someone likes me, do I feel the same way? What is this like?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's trying to figure out himself and if he's broken or not, because that's sort of how he thinks of it, because of how ubiquitous the idea of
Yeah.
both sexual and romantic
Everybody
love.
in the show keeps finding significant
really
others.
nice.
They don't all work out. I mean, some of them, you know, you see some relationships that crash and burn too. But Isaac hasn't had a relationship in his life, and he's not sure if he wants one. And it's just, he's really freaked out because like kind of all around him, like everybody's on a double date, a triple date, and then there's Isaac. And I think that, you know, she's the showrunner and the author who created it. That's more how she identifies.
And
Yeah.
she started this was a web series. And then
Gotcha.
it became incredibly popular, and that's when she started putting together the graphic novels.
Nice.
But for her, the thing, Heartstopper is so hopeful in a lot of ways, and it is definitely upbeat, and that is deliberate on her part.
yeah.
But for her, a lot of it had to do with some of her own history, with some of the mental health challenges that you run into, especially if you are outside the norm, if you're queer. And so that is one of the
yeah.
things that is very present in the novels and is becoming more present in the show, is talking about what effects it has on you to have people treat you this way. What happens to Charlie? He has, I mean, his mother's a little whatever, but his family's very supportive and love him, and they don't care that he's gay, and they never would have. So, but having the way he was treated after, and being someone who's introverted and shy and never wants to be in the limelight anyway.
Yeah,
regardless.
and I think you have the sense that he's always been very sensitive. He takes
Yeah.
things really to heart.
Yeah.
When there's any criticism, and he always blames himself. Even if
Yeah.
it wasn't clear that the blame was on him, he'll take it on.
Yeah.
Even when he's younger, because his friends describe, you know, what he was like as a kid growing up, and Charlie's always taken things really hard.
Yes. So
Yeah.
there's, people think sometimes, oh, this isn't a big deal. Someone has a supportive home life and has friends, which Charlie does. And it's talking about how that affects him. And and then also having that followed up be this older boy who then sort of just decides that Charlie is his. It's not really Charlie, just goes along with it because he thinks, oh, well, if somebody likes me, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll meet up with you in secret. I'll kiss you in secret.
And I'll be fine
I'll
if
text
you
you in
treat me like you don't
if
even
you
know
call me
me
like a dog and you dismiss me when you don't
Yeah.
make me around and you pretend not to know me in the hallway.
So that
in front of other
exasperates
people.
all of
Yeah.
that a lot.
It makes him feel like
and the
garbage.
fact, and he couldn't share anything having to do with him with his friends, because that is one of the things that all of these teenagers hold very dear, is the idea that you don't out people, that you
Yeah.
want to protect, even if sometimes
Yeah.
there's situations where maybe you want to say something because someone's going to get used as a beard, or it's still like you can't because you know that there's repercussions to that.
Right. That you have to let people
Do it on
claim
their
their
own.
truth in whatever ways they want, in whichever settings they want, and then not to have to constantly come out. Because someone who it's being taken for granted that they are normal and they know they are not, every single relationship, every single introduction, every room they're sitting in, they have to make a decision. Am I ready to come out in this space, in this moment,
Yeah.
with these emotional dynamics, with this individual, but also that individual? But I think these people can hear me. And when am I safe to say this? And when is it just too disruptive? And that's a lot of emotional, exhausting work that people that are anywhere on any queer spectrum are doing all the time.
Yeah.
And even if they've come out to no one, they are still asking those questions subconsciously or consciously or both every single second, all the
When
time.
can I be authentic? Where
Yeah.
am I safe?
Right.
Who is it safe
Yeah.
to talk to? Who am I going to find out is not going to accept me? Who am I
Yeah.
going to find out
Yeah.
does not want to be my friend?
Yeah.
Never mind.
And what'll happen? So you have to run through all the scenarios. So if it goes really badly, will I be kicked out? Will I be beaten up? Will I lose this relationship? Will I be
lose
told
this
I'm
job?
horrible? Will I lose this job? Will I not be admitted into this program? Will I be kicked out of this store? Will I be discriminated against in this class because the teacher's just going to get nasty? Like every single thing you think about, it can change how you're allowed to exist in the room. And I think there's a good sort of acknowledgement of how hard it is to come out and the levels of coming out that happen in the show, because like the two young women that are in a relationship do decide to fully come out as a couple at the girls' school during the course of season 1, and it's easier, it seems like, socially it's easier for one of them than the other. The other one definitely has a hard time. But then you learn at home, the one who had an easier time socially, Darcy, like admitting that they were a couple at home, is still in the closet and is still being like bullied and kind of abused by a very, very homophobic, unsupportive mother.
Yeah.
And so she's only socially confident and out. At home, it's like there's all this hiddenness again that you don't really learn about until season 2.
And you know that she's doing it because she knows. She's not questioning how her parents are going to react to her being a lesbian.
It's very clear.
It is very clear. So she is...
Because her mother's saying homophobic things already without Darcy even saying, well, I think I might be... Like,
no.
Her mom's already just being homophobic at her. On her already.
So she knows, and so she knows
it's not safe.
It is not safe for her to come out. She knows.
Yeah.
She doesn't need to even ask that question, which means that she is existing in an environment that's telling her inherently that she is wrong and bad.
Yeah.
And worth hating.
And I think Remy, it reminds me of like how nice playing at the Charlottesville Pride event this past year was at Seville Pride. Why don't you talk a little bit about that? Because I felt like so Heartstopper-ish about Seville Pride this year.
I don't know, like just playing it this year, and we've played Pride before.
Yeah,
but
we
like,
both played in other bands,
particularly
and we played together in Unheard,
just the reception from the crowd, and you can just feel I think we both felt like we were with our people.
Yeah.
And also with, our
more
nieces there and
preteens.
At least one of our nieces is queer, and so like,
all three of
her seeing the acceptance there.
We have all of our nieces are being raised to openly ask what their sexuality might be, and no pressure to answer that question, and the answer can change over time because we can also experiment and try different kinds of partners. But they were all like, your niece from your side and 3 nieces from my side of the family with all of their parents.
And they live in a very conservative area of our state and don't see stuff like this.
Yeah,
like,
and they
ever.
get to we have like different pride flags on our little tree now. You had like, all the different flags, and there were different stickers, and there were different bracelets, and there was like young people everywhere with their parents, like learning more, seeing there was like 20 different flags they could choose from at every stand, and there was a lot of like nonprofits that were present to like talk about resources. And then there was, between bands and the drag performing artists that they had as part of the Pride entertainment, they had political candidates that were coming up that were very supportive about fighting for our kids and fighting for rights and non-discrimination and protecting people's ability to exist in overturning homophobic, ridiculous bullshit and protecting all of us by having more acceptance and more laws that protect all of us from discrimination, which we all deserve, period.
Exactly.
And so it was nice to listen to the candidates too, because a lot of them were talking about members of their immediate family that have transitioned or that are gay or that are bi or trans, and some had children that are, and some had siblings or close friends. They related personally. This wasn't like, I need a lot of votes and this is an issue I'm supposed to talk about to win your vote. This was people are like, we are on the front lines. We're in a state that sometimes goes red, goes blue. We don't know. We have some really frightening things happening around the world and in our own country across different states with litigation and laws and, trying to make words illegal. Like that somehow erases identities.
Well,
if you just ban the word and the truth of it won't exist anymore. It's like, no, we don't live in that kind of alchemy. We all still exist even if you try to ban the word that describes us. But how fucked up is that's happening? So it made me happy to see these candidates. They're on opposite sides fighting for freedom.
So the governor of Florida and the kind of legislation he likes to pass. And so I have a friend who's non-binary. We were discussing our fears in terms of him running for president. And like a friend walked by who's also works with us, who's someone who's very open, very liberal, lived in Maine. It's very and I know he's someone who's like just not necessarily part of a queer scene, but part of scenes that definitely will have a large queer presence. And he had never heard of this governor, had never heard the name. And both my friend and I looked at each other like, and we told him why we were concerned about him. We told him about the laws. We told him about what was happening in Florida schools and about the Don't Say Gay law and all of these things. And he's like, why haven't I ever heard about this? And, you know, we looked at each other, and then he came back later, and I said to him, it's because you're a straight white guy. That's why. Because he's not someone who was uninformed in the world either.
Yeah.
But he didn't need to know.
It just missed
You
him.
just don't know, yeah.
It wasn't
and if you're not from
something-
that perspective, you don't know.
Yeah.
Which is why I brought up earlier, I wanted to ask you what the creator's identity was, because I think that's very important. Like, you can see in Heartstopper and in other things like sex education and like the media that's starting to come out, you can tell when it's by a queer creator. And it's not just somebody in a boardroom saying, we need representation now, so we got to put a black person here, we got to make this person bi, we got to make this person lesbian.
Queer
Like,
character, throw one in.
exactly, yeah.
And then they're like an
You can
afterthought, they're
tell
badly written.
when it's like some boardroom
Not the 80s
speak, and
anymore.
it's like it's not that. Yeah, but like when it's like authentic and when it's like good, like it's
No, Alice is
like you can,
definitely
it's
part
right
of the
there. You can
community.
cut the authenticity
Yeah.
with a knife. So yeah, as we're maybe transition to other things like how the culture is changing in like, at least in the art we're consuming. I have to briefly mention, I know we did a whole podcast on Hell of a Boss a couple months ago, but I'll briefly bring it up here, as well as Vivian Drano's other creation, Hazbin Hotel, which we've seen the full season of that now. She's a bisexual, woman, and so like and her art like is such a unique perspective you don't see anywhere, because like, well, I think with Heartstopper you see it a little bit like them establishing kind of these teens kind of like discovering their identities and how to deal with that greater world. But what I like about that and also other stories that are coming out is queer perspective stories that are not just about the trauma and the pain of being queer. What I love about Vivian's Hell universe in Hazbin Hotel and in Hell of a Boss is there are queer relationships and queer characters throughout it, but the story is not about them being queer or their trauma. They are queer, and it's very clear that that's what they are, but they have traumas, but they're not related to that. They're not, it's a different story.
Maybe
Exactly.
a little bit.
Like
Moxie was kind of rejected by his family.
Right,
and
but
he
that's like
had
the
a
one
boyfriend.
time, yeah.
Yeah.
And like the lead of Hazbin Hotel, Charlie, who starts the Hazbin
Has a
Hotel,
girlfriend.
has a girlfriend, but
And there's no
they're
issue
busy
with
running the hotel. It's like they're not having to deal with issues of being a lesbian and whatever. It's telling a
she just
deeper
has a girlfriend.
story that not just the same narrative we're always told over and over and over again, or have been told for decades through movies and stuff where. The queer character is either, a really bad stereotype or, God forbid, like a villain. Like Disney has a long history of doing queer-coded villains the longest damn time. And it's just like, it's expanding the narrative and telling stories. That's really how you get good representation in media that isn't like from a stupid boardroom that's saying we need to include these things. It's telling stories from different people's perspectives.
Just to put it out there, they also have Raya and the Last Dragon, which is an excellent Disney movie, and they're definitely coded as lesbians.
Yeah.
Right. I'm putting that out there.
They're
and
moving forward.
Yeah. So I'm
We're
glad.
just saying in the past there was much more of
absolutely.
a history of kind of if they were going to have anything that seemed like gay mannerisms or traits, then they were going to be assigned to someone who was also evil and the villain and hideous and awful.
Right.
So what's the association subconsciously for everybody out there consuming the Disneyverse, which is apparently so much of the world.
But also it's going beyond the characters
evolve.
Yeah.
Even in Disney, it's evolving.
Exactly.
Female characters are getting less one-dimensionally princess.
Not ending up in relationships.
Not having to end up in a relationship to justify their existence.
Right.
And, even male characters, too. It's just like there was, I don't know, such limited, fairy tale storytelling for such a long time. And now it's luckily expanding in a lot of series, which is...
And it's also going beyond just the characters being, coded, or there's a hint that they could be, but straight up overtly putting it in your face to the point where you can't cut it out for the Chinese audience. Yeah, I see you. You put the one gay scene and then you cut it out for them. I'm specifically pointing
government.
Exactly. I'm specifically pointing the finger at like Disney and others for doing that. It's like they'll do it in the States, but then they'll edit that part out. Like,
Well, it's one of the things that is difficult about representation.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
There is a lot of. It's called BL. It's called Yao. It's called. Dangmei, depending on which country you're in, which China has a huge web series and mangas that are
And
queer.
BL is
BL,
boy love.
is usually what they're called, BL. And they have had, what happens is you have these novels that are, the romantic leads are two men, and then it gets made into a TV series, and the creators have to make it so that it can pass the censors. But everybody knows that this is the couple that's supposed to be together. Now, just recently, China passed a law that makes it so they can't adapt any BL material into series at all, because of how this was being coded and how people were getting around the censors, and because of the massive popularity of things like The Untamed, which you can also watch on Netflix, which is one of these shows, and had a lot of international appeal and was very well received. And it's because of stuff like that that they then passed this law just like in the past couple of months. So those novels are now being adapted. One of them is being adapted, for example, in Taiwan, I think, with a Thai director. So it's just...
So again, there's just places around the world where it's not safe and it's being suppressed. And there's a fight even within the United States of America with some states where it's being more suppressed. And so it's important to talk about how this is showing up in culture and in art in more progressive, positive ways, because so many people are dealing with some variation of gender identity or sexuality that is not just cis hetero, just a white straight male paradigm. You know, that is not working for, you know, it's just not working for a lot of people. So you know, I feel like we're sending some support out there to all the people that might find us that relate to these and have had to deal with some of the issues of discrimination. And, you know, I think there's mental health discrimination and ability and invisible disability, and even trauma history causes us to have trouble sometimes coping and being in the world. And that's often and perhaps even nearly always, you know, somewhat invisible. Unless someone's like falling apart in front of you and you're like, I think they might have a trauma history. But if people are seeming to function, we don't really know what they're carrying. And there's a lot of likability stuff and mental health stuff. And that gets really tied up with racial discrimination and people that are from all different cultures and backgrounds. You know, anyone not white in the United States of America has dealt with flavors of racial discrimination. And then anybody queer with their gender identity or their sexual attraction to other people being anything other than that one old norm, which wasn't really the norm, because if you look back through history, there's all the different traditions of different genders and different roles, and people that when, you know, in certain contexts, it was always fine to have a lover of the same sex, you know, and then other times you're supposed to take a lover of the opposite sex and have children so that the tribe continued. But throughout human history, this stuff has all existed. And then it just got really repressive, I think. In the 20th century, there was a lot of repression, and right now we're seeing that around the world with more forces for repression, and it's just so inaccurate.
And this is also strongly tied into just misogyny and patriarchy, because a lot of ways that when people are venturing outside of these very, very, very narrow ideas of what it means to be a man and what it means to be a woman, and they tie that into sexual attraction as well, you are threatening...
And it's power, because the power is supposed to reside in a certain way with the men who have the power and they control things. And anything that changes, well, can you trust someone that doesn't seem all man with all that power? Because are they going to, you know, enforce the power in the ways that everybody expects them to enforce the power? And, you know, what about anybody else having power? Oh, God, now we're threatened. And we see all this fundamentalism and this swing back towards, you know, militant action all over the world, and some of it's religious, and it all gets tied up with queer culture, though, because, like, people with non-traditional, non-norm, whatever, non-dominant paradigm, I don't even know what to say about it anymore, because I don't actually know if it's even a majority of people that are this straight, cis thing. I don't actually believe that. It's a spectrum.
Nope. I don't believe
and
it
there's
either.
so many options about how, and you know, and that discrimination, though, is just on the rise, because I think things then were loosening up, have been loosening up, and then we get shows like Sex Education and Heartstopper that are very sex education is very sex positive, as well as exploring a lot of different sexualities. Not as much gender identity, but more sexuality.
A little bit,
but not as much. Heartstopper's really exploring all of it.
Yeah,
but it's
I'd say like
less sex positive because it's more of like about emotion.
About
And they're
emotional
also
love and stuff.
15
Yeah,
and
exactly.
16.
Yeah, they're
Right,
not-
exactly.
They're trying. This isn't.
There's
elite.
plenty of 15, 16-year-olds.
Yeah, no, this is not
sex
elite, though.
education getting it.
This isn't elite either. It's another show that has some
Yeah.
not positive representation. That's a soap opera. It's still good, but don't come at me saying that I'm saying bad things about elite. I'm not. I'm just saying that's more of a soap opera.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, there's different shows with different sort of pieces of this, but part
Yeah.
of what's lovely is seeing this begin to ripple out. That
Yeah.
it's not only just this one show or just this one show and this one other.
No,
show.
exactly, yeah.
That there's all of this work that is able to take in more of the true spectrum of who people are and how they feel and who they love.
Yeah.
And that love is love, and we can just be with them as like caring about them doing okay as characters and being happy that they are happy.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, one of the other things in terms of some of the repression and censorship that happens across the world, in our own country, across state lines and everything, is that there is these people who want to continue having this sort of strangle grip on how people express themselves, what's okay, what's not okay.
Yep.
Keep the control. Is that you can have a kid looking up, am I gay?
Yeah.
What does it mean to be attracted to someone? And
Yeah.
so you have all of this information, a lot more representation. There's a wonderful website called Scarlet Teen, which is a wonderful sex education website that I highly recommend. It's been around for a long time, but stuff like this exists. And it's geared towards kids that may not be getting this information from home or from school and who have been restricted because they want to educate. They're not trying to turn anyone. They're not trying to groom anyone. That's complete bull. But they want to help. They want to offer these resources so that kids can find themselves, so kids don't kill themselves. I mean,
Yeah.
people
and
get all their high
victimized
horse
by others.
about it, but
Yeah.
that's what it boils down to.
Because queer kids are also going to be very at risk, because if they begin to experiment and test out things and they are navigating in the dark, there can be really serious repercussions that can lead to, sexual assault or sexual harassment, and attacks. And
If you are a gay man who is assaulted, your likelihood of reporting it is much lower. And given how rape is handled in this country, even if you're not talking about queer people who are victims of it from the queer community, from other queer people, or from straight people trying to turn them straight, they're much, 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 much less likely to report it because they also know it's not going to be handled appropriately.
Yeah. Yeah, and so, these things are informing young people, and I think it's so important because it is easy to be at risk. And I think shows like sex education that have so many different kinds of kids, some having intercourse sex, some, fooling around and beginning to go from never having had any romantic or sexual contact into the world where they have had some, happens in the show Sex Education, which is another English television show created on Netflix. That's wonderful. And it's just the more it's all of this stuff is just trying to inform people, and I think trying to help uptight people to just relax and realize this is just how the world is. Yeah. And there's just so much of it. It's just everywhere. Stop fighting it. It's not worth it. It's a useless battle. Like, just chill the fuck out and let people get informed so they can be safe.
And also, like, if you don't want to, then just don't.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you don't like it, don't watch it.
Don't.
Yeah.
I mean, it's that easy.
We're not going to make you do queer sex if you just want to have heteronormative sex.
Right.
Good for you and your partner. As long as it's consensual, have at it. It's just about not judging other people and trying to take care of ourselves and our loved ones with more information and more freedom.
Yeah, and like, speaking of sex education, what I love is it definitely portrays the relationships of breadth of different relationships, both like, straight, also like, queer, lesbian, non-binary people. Like, there's so many in that show, but also the way it portrays sex is very like, I have a friend who like hates sex scenes in anything, like refuses to watch because it feels like it's just empty titillation or whatever. over. One, all of the sex scenes in Sex Education have a plot point and serve the greater plot and a narrative between two characters. And two, the sex in that show, for me personally, is so not titillating because it's so like awkward and something usually goes very wrong and it's usually
more
very
like real
real.
world.
Exactly. It's not, you know, like they playing saxophone music and they're to like, you know, get you
perfect,
horny.
get it
It's like,
on
no,
moment,
it's,
no.
yeah, it's not. It's
I really don't
they-
want anyone to
yeah.
play saxophone music. Just saying. Can you imagine?
To each their own.
Natalia would be like, boom, boom.
I mean, if it's Kenny G in the corner, I'll kick his ass out. But give me a sexy black man doing that, like, it works for me. That's just I'm just saying. It works for me.
Yes, we all have different seduction
We all have
needs.
different. We all
What is sexy
got our
varies for every person. Yes.
right.
We just want to respect that, what is sexy, you know, and give other people the right to find what they want to find sexy, you know,
Right.
without needing to feel threatened because it's different than our own. 'Cause I
Yeah.
think that power thing is like the biggest thing that gets into the patriarchy, colonialism, and misogyny. You know, with all of this, we get
Yeah.
this same tendency to want to have power and authority over that changes somebody's right or access to something else, and that's just an incorrect way to operate in the world.
Exactly.
I know we're a small voice, but we're
That's right.
saying it out loud, damn it.
Saying it out loud. We are here. We are queer, and we are really happy about. I cannot wait to see where the creativity is going again, because there's so many things. Like all the shows we've talked about here are like give me hope of like where stories can go now. There's like just so much untapped potential because it's been only told mostly by heteronormative cis people for so long that there's such a
And
breadth
white,
of
yes.
material that you can create now.
No, and that having, I mean, this is something, you know, having more women in the room, having more
Exactly.
people, black and people of color
Mm-hmm.
in the room, having more queer people in the room. It just makes it more interesting. It just makes it
Yes.
better, and it makes it
Yeah.
surprising. And one of the things, so I'm Colombian, and there are not a lot of positive representations in U.S.
Mm-hmm.
media about Latinx people in
Right.
general. Mostly maids, illegal immigrants, and
Drug
drugs.
dealers.
We were talking about that the other night. Yeah, it's
Gangbangers,
like
yeah, 'cause it's really, that's what exists out there still.
they're all
Not totally.
they're all
There are-
cholos with the
there's
some
cocaine.
exceptions, but-
There's some wonderful exceptions that exist that have done some wonderful things, but it is representation isn't about me as a little girl seeing positive representations of my culture. It is a little bit about that. It is about someone seeing themselves in media, knowing that they exist, knowing that they're allowed to exist, knowing there's nothing wrong with them. It is about that, but a lot of representation is about people who aren't queer, people who are white, people who are men, straight, white, cis men, realizing that all of these other people exist and are great.
Yeah.
And that they seeing them as subjects, not objects.
Yeah.
That is a big part of representation. It isn't just for the group being represented.
Yeah.
It is one of the things. It's
Yeah.
there's a bunch of different writers I've come across that say something to the degree of read lots of things because it teaches you empathy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It teaches you to see the world from a different perspective.
exactly.
And you can do that with any form of media.
Yeah.
You can do that with music. You can do that in a lot of ways. Art.
Yeah.
Even
Yeah.
even the silly popcorn, sugary art.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
still can do that for you.
Yeah.
It can just give you
And
this
following
Yeah.
YouTube creators or TikTok influencers or
Yeah.
shows or graphic novels. I mean, you know, not everybody is a book reader.
No, yeah, that's why I said
But
other
whatever
forms,
media, but like people not like yourself and not from your home culture, whatever your home culture or combination of home family cultures might be. Like other ones too. Like go, you know, like watching a lot of foreign cinema if you like film and, you know, going to gatherings where there's new stuff and making sure to get exposed to stuff that's from creators that are very different than yourself or your family's background. And that's, you know, we've been starting to go to more cons and I love seeing, you know, a lot of the like African American graphic novelists like sharing their
Yeah.
original stories. And
Yeah.
there was a group of Asian writers that had, like, they gave me like a novelette to sort of try to get me hooked into a beautiful fantasy series that they had created. And there's like Pride Alley with all of the queer artists coming out and doing cosplay and doing selling things and doing art, and it's just a celebration of so many things that are, you know, so many different cultures being represented. So wherever you can get access, it's important for all of us to have exposure to something other than what we grew up with.
Yeah.
So we realize we're all the same. Like, we all hurt, we all long to be accepted, we all want love, we all want security. We need to know where we're going to sleep, and that the clothes are going to keep us safe from the weather, and how we're going to get our next meal. Everybody needs that. Everybody cares about what happens to their children. Everybody, you know, except for people that have really deep abuse and trauma histories that get that all fucked up, and that cuts across cultures too. When people go through a lot of bad shit intergenerationally, you see this stuff break down. You know, that people experience pain in very similar ways. And it's regardless of our skin color. It's regardless of our gender. Or our sexuality, or our culture, or our religion. Just beings. You see other mammals suffer the way we suffer. You see other creatures, not just mammals, suffer. And love their young. And want to be safe. And, you know, it's not even just humans. But it's more than just me and my one little tiny tribe. Are these normal people that have all these feelings that are valid.
Yeah. 100%. Couldn't agree more. Is there anything else we want to touch on before we...
I don't know. When I brought
up
talking about Heartstopper and queer culture, was there anything else you were thinking of that you hoped we would share with whoever might happen to watch this episode?
No, just that you should watch it.
Yeah.
But also I think just like I find it, I mean, I am always a little bit of a social scientist when I'm watching things. That's just how my brain works. And so I think watching a lot of things from different cultures is really fascinating and really interesting. And we live in an age, as much as the internet can be the worst of humanity, it can also be the best of humanity. And to find these things where you can like get a glimpse of a different culture, because I don't have a ton of money. I don't know if I'm going to get to travel to these places. Yes, I want to go to Thailand. Yes, I want to go to Japan. Yes, I want to go to New Zealand. Yes, I want to go to Australia. There's a lot of places I want to go to. Okay.
Yeah.
But the chances of me going to all of them is probably zero. The chances of me going to some of them might happen, might not. I don't have a ton of money. I don't have a ton of time. I have a lot of responsibilities. Probably not going to happen, but I can experience glimpses and see how different cultures view gender, to see how other cultures view race, to see how other cultures view sexuality is really interesting. And it's really eye-opening in the idea of like the massive, there isn't just one way, you know, that there are so many ways of doing things. And it's just lets you have a glimpse to know that wherever circumstances you might be in, there are other ways of being. Therefore, if it's a bad place for you, you can try to figure out how to move out of that, or at least to know that in the world there are people who would love you and accept you.
Yeah.
Yes.
100% agree.
So whatever you're going through, there are people in the world that will love you and accept you.
That's right.
Whoever you are, whatever you're going through, it's still true.
And if the people who were supposed to, your parents, your friends and families don't, then the problem lies in them.
Yeah.
And not in you.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that's why it's important for us to have our chosen family.
Oh yeah, huge fan of chosen families.
Don't always arrive
100%.
into a family or a community that will support and express positivity and love for all people and all their experiences, and that's really awful. It's too bad. But there are people that will love and accept each one of you out there, and you have to keep keep exploring in whatever safe ways you can, through media, through social accounts, you know, through going to things in person and talking to different groups and trying to find your people, find your chosen family. And
one of the things that the queer community, at least in the United States, and I think in other countries as well, has really strived to do is to be that. To be like, we will take you. We will find you. We will be your parents. There are people who are, in fact, that's what they do. They're content creators. They're putting resources out there and saying, we will be your parent. If you need someone to walk you down the aisle in your gay wedding, we will do it. If your parents won't show up, we'll be your parents.
Nice.
And that has always been part of the queer community. It's like that we will become your family. If your family kicks you out, if your friends and family, if you're destitute, we will help you.
Yeah. I'm going to steal a phrase from a popular YouTuber, Council of Geeks, because fuck it bears repeating. You are beautiful, you are valid, and you are loved.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think that's a great way to wrap that segment.